Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The benefits of virtual recording and benefits of watching the recording, whatever time that allows you to be free and enjoy. My presentation today is going to be on my dissertation, and the presentation is called "What Leads Teachers with No Formal Arts Background to Integrate the Arts." Just to give you a little background on myself, my name is Hasmeek Avati-Singh-Cochran, and I have been educator for the past 35 years, 30 years of that being full-time teaching at the lab school at UCLA. And part of my specialization is arts education in conjunction with early childhood education. Just to give you a little background on myself. It was through a special teacher that I found my own calling in the arts. This was not in elementary years. This was not in middle school or high school or college. This was after I graduated and got my bachelor's in sociology and English literature, that I started working at the lab school in a classroom as an assistant for Lorraine DiRocco, a very special mentor of mine, who was also an arts educator as well as early childhood educator. And she was instrumental in opening a gift within me that no one in my educational lifetime had actually discovered before. And it was through this period where I was working with her and noticing all the art-rich experiences that the children were having. I also was discovering that these children really loved coming to school. The joy of being in that environment, the joy of engaging in creativity, the joy of being able to express themselves through different mediums was something that I had not ever seen in my own education and background. Education was always a chore. Well, education was always very dry for me. Education was always something that you did, but the joy was missing. In this special place, I discovered children had joy for learning. And I was wondering what was instrumental in this process. And I discovered that the arts were instrumental in bringing joy in these students' life, and also the variety of mediums that they could express themselves. They were very open, out of the box thinkers. They could just, and the teachers validated the aspects of themselves that were unique, and they were expressive. So what I would do is I would actually mingle and just enjoy the art projects with the kids. And sometimes I would forget that I'm an assistant in the classroom and would delve into the projects with the kids. And then when I would go home, I would experiment on my own, and I would kind of think about what I learned, what I observed, what I was part of that day, and I would kind of replicate or kind of find my own freedom of becoming my own expressive individual. So at the end of the year, my beautiful mentor, who just passed away actually this year, but she's a light within me who opened up a world. She looked at me and she said, it was my birthday, and she said, I notice you have a calling. I like you to express yourself more, and I would like you to grow in this area, which was being an artist. And since that day, I never stopped painting. So here are some of my works that I would like to share with you. This is very much inspired by my journey to Australia, looking at the Indigenous Australians and their work, and the whole idea of pointillism and telling stories through your art and passing your ancestry through the works of art. And when I came back, I used acrylic paints, I used chopsticks, I used many different modes of working in terms of kind of using those inspiration in the works that I created. I also experimented with different types of expression as well. This was done with acrylics and just lines that I created through melting of the line paints and working with paints and layering with paints. This was done with paper mache and using glue as a mode of construction, as well as three-dimensional work that I hadn't experimented before. This is mandalas, using different types of cultural backgrounds to get inspiration. So mandalas are spiritual work. You start at one space and work your way into creating a whole holistic piece. And this piece was inspired by my work with School for Arts Leaders through the National Arts Education. And this was my inspiration and expression of what leadership meant to me. Of course, the words have continued to grow on that. I had create and inspire and live the life you love at the very beginning, but I have continued on and adding more words of leadership as I have gone on and educated myself in this area more. So why arts and teacher practice? This kind of goes back to my own early beginnings of how a teacher was the one who inspired and opened up a gift within me. And I know the roles of teachers are extremely important in students' lives. So teacher practice is instrumental, and exploration of that practice is instrumental in figuring out how are teachers able to, without any arts background, be providing experiences for students in the arts that enriches their lives, that adds another dimension of joy in learning and a form of expression that opens up worlds for students. I also have been extremely concerned with declines in arts at schools and arts education in schools, which are really showing up as adults. There are less people wanting to engage in arts and know about arts because they did not experience arts education in their own learning. And I believe significance of the arts in our own lives. Without that, in my own life, I feel there is a piece missing. And arts are significant also in exploring, recording what's going on in our cultural setting and in our lives. So looking at the literature reviews, I looked at many different articles. As you know, being a graduate student, there's so much to explore. One of the parts that I really explore is looking at benefits of arts education. In Pepler, Powell, Thompson, and Catterall, 2014, fostering art skills as well as gains was very apparent in English language development. So kind of citing that whole idea of that arts really help in your academic learning. I also looked at Catterall and Pepler, just looking at arts within themselves and the beauty of the arts and how it actually opens up worlds for children. They found in 2007 there was increase in self-efficacy and beliefs and originality in students through the arts-rich experiences. And Winter and Headlands in 2006 looked at how arts develop habits of mind. Teacher beliefs were also very important in how teachers use the arts in their classroom. In 2006, Orrick found that common themes emerge among high users. All students are capable of high achievement, recognize diversity of learning styles, intelligences, abilities, multiple ways of reaching students, and teachers who had autonomy in teaching practices and expressing creativity were more high users of the arts in their classroom. Orrick also in 2004 discovered that teachers' self-efficacy and self-image relating to creativity and artistry influence arts use in the classroom. In professional development, Lind found that Collaborative Design Institute over a course of a year with ongoing inquiry, reflection, and mentoring in the arts, curriculum design, creative inquiry, and arts leadership really helped to impact teachers' practice as well as students. And Goldberg and Hall and Saraniero, what types of structure best impact teacher learning in arts integration? They found that Summer Institute model and Summer Institute with coaching throughout the year compared to control group had much greater impact in arts influences in teachers' practice. And finally, Pepler, Powell, Thompson, Catterall, supporting teachers for arts-infused classrooms, successful impact on teachers who were given tools and strategies to integrate the arts for their diverse learners. And they were mentored in new arts methodologies, learned how to construct creative classrooms, and collaborate with art specialists, were highly motivated to teach the arts. Of course, there are many barriers that we always hear about: planning, collaboration with art specialists or experienced teachers, time, and how to integrate the arts in the curriculum during the day was a big barrier for many teachers. Finally, lack of knowledge and awareness, lack of autonomy to do what you want to do and how you construct your curriculum, as well as limited administrative support, even sometimes discouragement, led teachers to kind of forego this aspect of education. My research questions really kind of delve in the following. What leads elementary school teachers with no formal arts background, teaching at schools with strong professional development opportunities and social justice agenda, to incorporate the arts in the curriculum? And how might this integration vary across teachers and schools? So the conceptual framework was Eisner's 5 pillars for education: judgment, critical thinking, meaningful literacy, collaboration, public service. Of course, this can be done through many modes, but arts education is critical in bringing forth these aspects into the education system. My data collection process was with 16 teachers, 2 different sites, a lab school and inner city charter school. So to just give you some background on these 2 sites, they both had 2 things in common. As a school, they had deep value of the arts and embraced the idea of inquiry education, where there is connection between standards needing to be covered with students' interests. There's depth in studies and projects that the students investigate. They question, they investigate, they research and solve problems that might be present in their classrooms, schools, communities, or in the larger world at large. The arts play the role of documenting work, sense-making, representing understanding, expressing, and creating. So that was something that both schools embraced. And just to give you more background, so lab school, part of a larger university. Mission was teaching, learning, public engagement, and research. They have yearly budgets for classrooms, so arts were never not done because there was no budget. So arts was part of it because teachers had budgets. There was access to professional developments and also connection and access to wider university campus. And in terms of charter school, the mission was to respond to ever-growing, changing needs of the Southern California's most challenging communities. Most students lived in low-income households. 53% of the students were English language learners, and it was situated in downtown Los Angeles, in midst of Skid Row. So to have these 2 amazing spaces where the arts were integral to the students' life was something I wanted to investigate and see how both of these sides, very diverse, very different, but both embracing the arts as integral part of students' education. I used purposeful sampling, and my interviews were semi-structured interviews, one-on-one, on Zoom for 45 to 60 minutes. My data analysis was through listening and journaling initial ideas, and after transcription, read and listened for accuracy, took notes on how teachers described, for example, arts integration process, personal background, professional development opportunities, any barriers or unexpected data that might arise through this process was also noted and made part of the research. Keeping holistic picture of my participants in mind, looked for themes and patterns amongst them, as well as emerging codes. Finally, used Max QDA to develop those codes and analyze my data. And some of the visuals that you see on the sides are part of the work of the teachers that they were passed on to me through this research project. Findings. One of the key things that I started with each teacher was to talk about a project that they were very fond of, they took pride in, and they wanted to share. So before I delve into my findings, I would love to share one of the stories. I was working with the second grade class, and this was a teacher who worked at the charter school and had a second grade class. And this was something that she kind of loved having in terms of her need to be in a space where arts were integral. And we were studying pollination and the different parts of the plants. And it was very powerful to see students develop and be able to show and demonstrate their understanding of what we were studying and the different standards through art. One of the projects that we had, it was ongoing. It took 2 weeks for the project to develop. We started with a lot of inquiry questions, like, what are the different parts of a plant? What makes up a plant? We went on to connecting that with pollinators, and students started the process of observing and recording. Teacher, what do you notice? What do you wonder about? So these were some things that the teacher, the posing open-ended questions, got children to really think about and ask their own questions. And we took those questions and began to do some research in terms of what are pollinators and what animals are considered pollinators. One thing that I really want to relay is that students took ownership of the inquiry process, because I noticed that they were so into the arts and the creative part of that project. So students felt very empowered when the arts component of our unit of study came about. It was different for them. It wasn't a sit-down test. It was not a fill this worksheet or this activity. Didn't feel like school for them. That's what I felt from my students. I had a student say, oh, this is fun. Students cheered every time we would move into that part of the day, and students got very creative. We started off with the investigation of pollinators. We started with sketching. We did a lot of sketching. I just got this idea of bringing in actual caterpillars into the classroom. We grew our own butterflies right there in the classroom. This was ongoing, and there was a lot of sketching, daily sketching that happened based on their observations. They compared their sketches to when we first got the caterpillars to the day that we released the butterflies. It was wonderful to see students make observations about the life cycle of butterfly and start making all these connections. It wasn't just the pollinators of the sketches that we did. Then we moved on to 2- and 3-dimensional pieces where students created 3D plants and pollinators. It was wonderful to see students get very creative. We used recyclable materials from trash for teaching. It sent a powerful message to students. We are able to take care of our environment, recreate from what we already have and what we were given. Teacher, so these are our materials. What can we create? I really liked the creative piece. We had flowers everywhere in the classroom. You would walk into the classroom and it felt like you just were inside a flower garden where pollinators were just floating and flying everywhere around you. During the day, we had a walkthrough where other students and teachers walked into our classroom. Students were so willing to explain the process. What is it that we are walking into? What are the different parts of a flower? What is a pollinator? But we not only did that, the students took it even further. They learned the importance of bees in our environment and how the number of bees are going down here in LA County. And we took that and started investigating. Teacher, how can we help? So the students wrote a letter to our Los Angeles mayor, and they asked the administration to please plant more purple plants around the city because purple flowers attract bees. This was wonderful to see. It began with a question and evolved into an actual process. We used that process to have students share their knowledge and what they're learning in different kinds of ways. Things we're not used to as teachers. We're so used to here's a rubric, write me an essay, here's this test, and there's multiple choice tests. But through this, I was able to assess students' understanding of the concepts that they were learning. I think that students, just based on their grades, were more willing to participate. They were understanding the concepts more, and they were scoring higher on actual science tests because they had tangible examples. They took back and said, oh, I remember that. These are the parts of the flower, and I made it. So some students were able to make that connection, like, oh, yeah, I remember I was in charge of the pistil. So I remember that. So that connects to this. And labels were everywhere in our classroom. The engagement was higher throughout that time. That's probably one of the best art integration that I've done so far. There are others too, but the one that I remember the most is that one, because not just of the creative portion, but seeing students take ownership of their work and seeing students be able to represent their knowledge in different ways. Before I was so afraid of art, I was doing arts and crafts in my classroom. To me, art just represented like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. Let's make heart with glitter. But being able to see how the arts are incorporated into academics and within a unit, within lessons, that was powerful, not just for my students, but for myself too. So looking at the findings. Now, finding one, both schools, the arts were integral part of the culture. The arts live in these schools. So when you walk into the space, visually, you can see that the arts are present. They are documented in the work that the classrooms are doing. They're also documenting in the hallways in the offices of these schools. Children's work is hanging beautifully in the spaces, and every visitor who walks in is kind of mesmerized by the quality of what these students can do. And so one of the teachers, as I go along, you're going to see many quotes from the teachers. When you are at a school that values the arts, you don't have a choice. You must be integral part of promoting that work in the students. So part of one of the findings was that, many teachers were attracted to teaching at the school because of the inquiry-based model that the schools promoted, and having arts integrated in such critical way was something that attracted them to come. Some of them did not know how to do it, but this willingness and wanting to learn was integral part of their decision making. So bringing into inquiry is foundational to arts integration. So as you notice on the side, one of the classrooms was building an ecosystem, and arts were integral in the learning process, in expressing, sense making, documenting, as well as finally promoting and projecting the work in kind of a public setting where everyone could come and learn from it. As one of teachers said, inquiry is art and art is inquiry. So you cannot really separate the two because they're all integral part of the process. Finding 3, as I said in the first finding, teachers were very much as learners. They were wanting to learn. They didn't see themselves as, oh, I know a lot and I'm going to present my knowledge to my students and they will learn from me. But they had the mindset that we are learning together with the students. I'm open to new things, as one teacher speaks about, and that's why I think I'm not one of those teachers that has the same plan book. I want to be responsive to my students, to the world, to my teammates that I'm working with. So every year, based on your teammates, based on your students, your teaching will change because what you have in front of you is very different from the year before. And teachers were very much willing to learn, grow side by side. So as a teacher, if I come into a space and I'm afraid of teaching the arts, but I have the mindset that I can learn with my students, that opens up avenues of how do I do that? How do we set up an environment where we learn together? Finding 4, power of the collective engagement. One of the teachers talked about how I feel like having a team of people to work with to do things is what made you feel like you could do this. And the integral part is that you're not alone. It's a community that values the arts. It's a community that helps you to learn how to do this work. It's a community that engages in professional developments together, collaborates. So when you are here and you see these amazing works created before from other teachers, sometimes it becomes very challenging. You're like, wow, how can I do that? I don't have the skills. But the people, the collective is there to engage you in this work, help you answer your questions, step by step, divide up the process for you so you can engage. Having the mindset of a learner also gets you to also see, I'm learning in this process and I will make mistakes. And there are people who are there to support me. Finding 5, mentor artists. I think that beginning, the process of inquiry, that piece of planning is so important. We're always spiraling right back to our goals, combined with student interests. But also as teachers, we're looking at artists and making sure that there's diversity and there are different voices being heard through the arts. So the mentor artists not only become a space where you are learning from the artists in terms of style, in terms of materials used, in terms of context and background, as well as the social activism that the artist brings to the table. You're also collaborating with the kids using the artists as an inspiration to build the work in the classroom. So mentor artists become very integral part of this inquiry that the children and you as a collective are engaged in. Finding 6, professional development as experiential process. So before we even jumped into work with students, one teacher said, he walked us, he being the professional development leader, through the process ourselves, as if we were the students, the young artists. So one of the key findings in this space was that teachers who did this work very well and consistently had very strong professional development opportunities where they experienced the process themselves before they got their children and students engaged in the process. So if it was the work of sketching and learning through inquiry how to integrate the arts in the curriculum, they actually had experienced it in their professional development classroom or stage. They were part of the process of how do you sketch, how do you observe, how do you inquire about something, and how do you document that? How do you take that sketches and turn it into mural work or individual bigger pieces, expand and add more details? How do you take the individual work that had come from sketching into 3-dimensional work? So the teachers had been able to experience the process, know their own challenges, know what students might actually experience through the process, and then they jumped in with the work in their own classrooms. There were no variation amongst teachers or schools in this process, and this was something that was apparent. So teachers who were new to this experience versus teachers who had been practicing this for many, many years, had similar approaches, similar ideas about what was really helpful to them in integrating the arts. And all of them, depending on how young in terms of their experience versus how many years of experience they had, they were still on that journey of learning. There was something to learn each year in this process. But what was integral is that they never stopped doing it because they valued the arts and they valued the role of arts in their curriculum and teaching. Conclusions. All of the findings, that was the most integral part, are interwoven into a beautiful tapestry, and they exist in unison to bringing real transformation to communities. So all of the findings that I had, schools that valued the arts, teachers who were learners, inquiry being integral to this process, mentor artists, professional development that were hands-on, and collaborative environment where teachers learn from each other as well as from their mentors, and there was constant dialogue about how to do things, how to improve. Those did not work in isolation. They actually worked together, and one element fed the other element. They could not be like, you couldn't just say, we're going to just have professional developments that are hands-on and that's going to improve arts education in our school. That would not work in isolation. You had to have all of these different elements together and working together in order things to actually come to life. Implications of this research. This research not only impacts arts education, but education as a whole in transforming schools. So real change happens only when many important elements work together in unison to change practice and influence students. And so just as I was saying, that these pieces are working together in these two schools to bring the type of impact in integration of the arts in the classrooms that we want to see, and the consistency that we want to see over the years. If you take part of these elements and not pay attention to, like, for example, you're not having collaborative team teaching model in your, and all of a sudden teachers are in isolation working in their own room. You don't have planning time where they can talk. All of a sudden, you're going to see less and less of the work happening because there's an element that is integral in this process that is taken away. So recommendations, schools can create ethos where teachers who are interested in arts integration can engage in this work. So the value you put on arts education, from administration to down to the people who work there, is integral. So creating those environments in your school where arts are integral and they are visible and they are seen as you walk through the hallways, through the classroom, helps other teachers who are interested to join in this work. Professional development must match the inquiry process and have, these aspects taught together with the experiential process in place as well. Teachers can intentionally choose mentor artists to fuel, inspire, and extend learning for their students. So these recommendations will not create the type of work that we see in these schools, but these are recommendations that might start the movement of the machine towards that. Recommendations for future research: work of school leaders in creating arts-rich environments. So looking at what do they do? What are the things that leaders in these schools do that helps them create these arts-rich environment. And it would be also interesting to listen to what their backgrounds were. Sometimes you come from lack of arts background, just like I did, and all of a sudden being in a rich arts environment creates you see the value that you yourself had missed out on. How do you create meaningful collaborations? Many of us talk about collaborations, people just talking, but how do you create meaningful collaborations that lead to change? And looking at synergy of elements impacting practice. How do you, when you want to change something in schools, what are the elements that you need to look at, investigate, and put in motion all together in order for it to impact practice? We also kind of looking at work of pre-service teacher. What are some things that pre-service teachers might need to really begin kind of like put the seeds in terms of the importance of arts education in their own practice as they enter schools where there might not be any? And finally, role of mentor artists. Mentor artists from diverse groups, communities, as well as what we see the role of, and also who are the mentor artists. They don't just live in museums, they live in our communities, they live in our classrooms. So looking at the work of mentor artists, as well as what they communicate in terms of activism in the world through their art, is really integral in our classroom in this area of integration. And so thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to talk to you. This has been a privilege. And I feel like this is the time when we actually begin dialoguing together and asking questions. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact Hasmeek Avitisian Cochran. And I teach at UCLA Lab School, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.